Hello guys, if you're a JavaScript professional or you're learning JavaScript, you might be wondering why there are two ways to create function in JavaScript and what are the major difference between them. What is function then? Function is nothing but a set of instruction which is created inside the function, whether this or this, to perform specific task or a specific business logic. You can create function in two ways in JavaScript, one using this function keyword and one using this syntax, where you have parameters, arrow symbol, and the statements you want to create. But if you don't know, there is one major difference between these two functions which we are going to discuss in this video. Alright, this function is basically comes up with the first version of JavaScript. It was always here, it is again still here. This was introduced in Ecmascript 2015, which is also called as ES6. Alright, why it is introduced if there was a function syntax already? It is introduced because we as a JavaScript community wanted something similar, something precise, something small, compact to pass functions as a callback in our code so that we don't need to write this. And this should be flexible enough. How this is flexible? So if you remember, if you used to work on React code, and if you're using this function syntax as the state or as a prop of the component, you need to bind the class context to this function. But in the case of arrow function, now if you are using functional component in React or in Angular, you wouldn't need to bind anything with this arrow function, no binding. Why? That is the purpose of arrow function in JavaScript. Arrow function doesn't have their own this. They depend this from the lexical scope. Lexical scope. So now what is lexical scope? Lexical scope is nothing where your function is being used. Let's take an example. Your function is being used in this place, but it has a parent which also has this. It has a parent which also has this. This is lexical environment. So arrow function doesn't have their own this. They depends on their parents, whether it's an immediate parent or whether it's a parent in the chain list. They're going to use this from the immediate available lexical scope environment where this is present. Right? It could be this, it could be this. But in the case of function, which is totally different, function can be used as a constructor in JavaScript as well. Before 2015, there were no classes and objects present in JavaScript. If you want to work as an object-oriented programming language, or I would say object-based programming language, we used to have new keyword we can use with function. Call function with new keyword, then it's going to be act as an object. If you're creating a function and calling it with new keyword, it is going to act as a constructor and it's going to create its own this. It's not going to depend on any this from the lexical scope or the current context. But if you're calling this function with the name only, you're not using any keyword, then it's going to use global or window context. If it is not nested inside another function. If it is nested inside another function, then it's going to use lexical scope like your arrow function does. Let's take an example. We can use arrow function like this. Even if you have a single parameter, you don't need to define a parenthesis. You just need to run your logic like this. If your arrow function is returning something, you can return something without even curly braces. And function being a function, you need to define wall function keyword, parenthesis, and the logic you have to create. And if you want to bind this current context on this function, you need to call bind as well, and this. Now let's jump to the example and understand how these things work. Alright guys, let's try to understand these things with some example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print this here. Let's see what is going to print me this in this file, test.js file. Not test. So every file you create in JavaScript has this, and this test.js has also this. Now it is empty. It is not binded with any context. The most top level context in JavaScript file is basically global or window. Right now it is not binded. In strict module files, this is basically empty. Now if I do this, console, let's create a function. And if I just call this function and run this, see, it is also empty because this file doesn't have any context to bind with this arrow function. That's why it is empty. And this is giving me an empty object. But if I do something like this, function b console.log this b, it is giving me so many things. And if you see carefully, it is giving me global. What is global? Global is a global context in Node.js file, and if you are running it in browser, it is going to be the window object. Why it is giving me this this global object in this function but not here? That is the whole purpose of arrow function. Arrow function depends on its surrounding. The surrounding is basically this file, and this file doesn't have any context, so it's not going to have any context. Your function, if you're calling the function with the name, you are not using it as a constructor, then this function is going to be created in the global context. If I do this, global this and global is basically same. Global this is basically window or global, both in the new node environment. So you don't need to use window and global separately. You just need to use global this, and b. If you see, the b is present in global this context, means whenever using a function keyword to create a function, it's directly goes to the global context and be settled there. That's why it's this. That means the b parent is going to be the global, and global this is the basically global object. If I do something like this dot name is equal to b, and if I run this, and it is going to print me b, I guess, and it must be having one extra property. Oh, I need to use single arrow, my bad. It is going to have one extra property, that is b. Now it is directly acting on the global context. Now let's try something new. What if I do something like this? Is c is equal to new d. Now what's gonna happen? If I see, I guess it's not going to run if you're running as an object. You need to have this inside some function. Maybe let's create one function, this dot create console.log this. Let's remove it from here, and c dot create. C dot create, yes, and let's do this function. Now it is happy. We are creating function with function keyword. Let's try to run this. Now, if you're using new keyword with your function, then it acts as an object. Now it is an object. It's not a normal function. It is a constructor which is creating an object, and object is being stored where? In C. But if you use arrow function here, now what's going to happen? It's still going to use its parent context. Which one is a parent of this arrow function? This. Obviously, it is printing the right thing. But if you just have it as a function, and if I just have it as a arrow function, const being is equal to this, and if you try to run this somehow, it's not going to let you run, because, and let's for now time being remove this as well. Okay, now let's try turn again. It's not going to let you do it because arrow function cannot be a constructor, because they don't have its own context, because they depend on the parent context. That is why arrow function is being created to be specifically working with callbacks. Nowadays, if you're working on modern development, you have to work on callbacks again and again. If you're using functional components in React, you have to work with the functional component context again and again. If you end up using these functions, then you need to bind the context to this function again, because they do have their own context. But if you're using arrow function, you don't have to do this. Let's see one example. See, I guess I need to just do this like this. Okay. In class components, when we used to have a function which changes a state, then we have to bind this to the function. But using arrow function, you don't have to do this. Just do this dot set state is equal to whatever value you want to pass, maybe 0. It's going to work. Maybe we can simplify this, something like this. Voila. You don't have to depend on the bind now. That's what we used to do before. And if we see our example from the banner, right now, if you just have this function as a constructor and pass Alice, it is going to work because we are passing arrow function here. But if I just change it to the function, and I need to define parentheses for sure, it's going to print me after seconds for sure, but it's not going to work. Because this, why it is not giving me this dot name? Because see, this is a set timeout. Set timeout is going to run after some seconds. And when it's going to run after some seconds, it's going to lose the context. And it's going to depend on the context present in this function, because it is a nested function. It is not the function created at the top of the file. So this is going to be empty. But if I do something like this, dot name, something like this, now after 10 seconds, it's going to print me who, because it depends on the current context. But again, with the arrow function, we don't have to worry about the current context. So I hope you guys like this content. If you like, please leave a comment. I will create a video on lexical scoping as well very soon. If you have any feedback for me, please let me know on the comment. Thank you so much for watching.